Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our conversation today, why cloud security matters. We're going to go through some lessons from some real-world attacks that we're seeing out in the wild. So we're going to explore today how we can build, our organizations can build cyber resilience. How can we protect our cloud systems? How can we keep our data safe and secure? My name is Rob Schenk. I'm with Intelligent Technical Solutions, and here at ITS, we specialize in helping small and medium-sized businesses thrive by managing and securing their technology. A couple of housekeeping notes as we get going here. The conversation should run roughly around 30 minutes or so. We'll stick around for some Q&A at the end. You'll notice a Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar there. Please feel free to submit your questions as we go along. We'll have some time at the end for some answers and questions and answers. We want to make this as collaborative as possible, so please do chime in. Love to hear that engagement and questions from the folks out in the audience today. Alrighty, so let's move here. Presenters, you're going to notice a QR code in the lower right corner there. That's going to lead to a special offer for attendees of the webinar. In case you have to drop early, you might want to take a photo of that and submit that request. So for today's discussion, I want to welcome our very special guest, Patrick Curtin. Patrick has over 30 years of experience in the tech sector, 20 of those in cybersecurity, and has extensive background as an enterprise SOC manager, Security Operations Center manager. So welcome, Pat, and look forward to the discussion today.
Thanks very much, Rob. Really happy to be here to share some thoughts on this incredibly important topic.
For sure. So a lot to get through here. So we got a jam-packed session here. So the challenge here is how to condensing all this into a cohesive narrative and providing a lot of educational value for attendees. So hopefully we're hitting the mark here. So first off, we're going to start reviewing just how are the vast majority of companies out there kind of protecting themselves. What are some exposures that they're not aware of potentially? We'll dive into some common methods that we're seeing out in the wild for how hackers and threat actors are targeting and attacking cloud systems. And then we'll walk through some actual real-world attack methods that we're seeing in the wild. We call it an adversary-in-the-middle attack. And so, at the end of the day, with awareness, we can protect ourselves more effectively. And we want to review, okay, how do we just avoid problem from occurring in the first place? How do we avoid becoming a victim? And then we'll dive into some questions from the audience. So without further ado, let's get going here, Pat. Alrighty, to set a baseline here, so we're talking about limitations of EDR for cloud-based attacks. So let's just first, what is EDR? We'll define that. And let's talk about how companies are approaching their cybersecurity architecture, and let's review some of the challenges that we're seeing out there. Maybe we can kind of start with the baseline there, Pat.
Sure. So, most organizations have a ground level foundation of the basic stuff, and what I'm talking about there are, firewalls, antivirus, and EDR, endpoint detection and response. And unfortunately, this kind of basic level of cybersecurity, while it's okay for, what we were seeing 10 years ago, it's not okay for the cloud attacks that we're seeing in 2025. 10 years ago, cloud really wasn't much of a thing. It was starting to penetrate into organizations, but really that was early adopters in 2015. Now it's pervasive. Now every organization has some kind of cloud instance, cloud application, or there are some organizations that are almost fully cloud. And the legacy cybersecurity techniques just aren't up to snuff. And we can go a little bit into detail about why that is.
Yeah, so just for clarity purposes, EDR, like endpoint detection and response, that's effectively, for layman terms, like next generation antivirus, is that?
Yeah, like if you think about the most common thing you'll see is like in M365, we're talking about Defender, something that's there for free, that is not really, it's pretty good, it's quite verbose, but it just isn't meant to defeat the kind of attacks that we're seeing in the cloud today. It's designed for something else. So So to meet these new challenges, new approaches really are needed.
Yeah. So just kind of holistically looking at the, the landscape. So companies effectively need to be protecting kind of multiple pillars, right? So we have the computers themselves, the workstations, the servers. We kind of think of that kind of category as kind of like endpoints, right? And then we have network related devices. So things like Wi-Fi, mobile devices, smart TVs, video surveillance systems, anything that gets like an internet address on a network, right? Could be a potential, vulnerability. And then we have cloud systems. So all your kind of Office 365, Google, Box, Dropbox, and all those kind of related, Salesforce, et cetera. And so really to protect a network, we really want to have ideally visibility over the entire spectrum. But most businesses at this point, based on kind of what you're saying, is that they're kind of focused more on the computer system. So the EDR is kind of more of endpoint protection focused, right? That you're kind of missing some of the other kind of vulnerabilities or areas of exposure.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity starts with visibility. And you simply cannot defend what you can't see. So you need visibility into what you have, into what you're using. And that allows you to do two things. First, it allows you to figure out if, how vulnerable you are. Are there things you can do improve to make yourself less vulnerable, shrinking your threat surface? And then that visibility also allows you to see what is going on and to detect malicious activity, right? And in too many cases, that visibility is incomplete and it's not tied together. It's all silos. So what we really advocate is a holistic view where everything is knit together. And that's important because what happens on one system can impact another system. It's that context. So that's another place where EDR, something like Defender, is really focused on an individual thing and not the whole. And you need to be able to look at the whole to figure out what's going on, especially against these attacks that we're seeing now.
Yeah. And so where does shift happen? Largely pandemic driven, would you say, Pat?
Yes. So, if you step back, the principles of cybersecurity really haven't changed since I've been in the business, but the technology that we're using keeps changing, right? That's that, and it's changing wildly, right? So, we mentioned cloud starting really about 10 years ago. Then we had, with work from home, this, all of a sudden, systems everywhere, right? And so you have to keep adapting to these environments if you're going to do a half decent job of protecting them.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk through some of the limitations of EDR. So maybe you can talk that at a kind of a high level.
Absolutely. So these traditional systems that I was talking about are really blind to what's going on in the cloud. Now, recall when you move to the cloud, things that were on-prem are now not on-prem, right? And it's literally your data going on to someone else's servers. And so the mindset has to change. And one of the major, I'll throw it out there right now, one of the major attack vectors that are being used right now are identity attacks. Okay, what are identity attacks? It's a fancy way of saying people are trying to steal your credentials, or someone else might steal them and sell them, and then a cyber criminal is going to come at you with your username and your password. And in a lot of cases, that's the keys to the kingdom. And these traditional systems do not look for that. They are assuming that a valid username and password are from the valid user, right? So that's like a huge blind spot right there. The cloud basically is on another layer. It bypasses or it's just not in the same place as these traditional defenses, right? And as a result, those systems don't have context for what's going on. And really that boils down to you don't have coverage for things like Google Workspace for M365. I mean, Defender provides a little bit, but not very much, right? And no coverage for these all these SaaS platforms that we're using, Dropbox and all and Salesforce and all those kinds of things. And you can take advantage of information that is there. And when I say you, a security provider can, in fact, knit all that in. And so that's how you move forward, how you add layers onto these traditional defenses.
So we can talk through, Pat, like, because what are some of the methods that hackers are now starting to use to attack these cloud systems and get to, cloud data?
Sure, there's a few of them that actually, Chloe, if we could go to the next slide. There's a few I'll outline here, and then we'll go into one in detail. But let's start with phishing. Phishing is still the #1 technique. But we talked about changing technology. The way phishing is being used has changed a lot. It used to be that phishing emails were intended to trick you into clicking on a link that would either bring you to a malicious website that would serve up malware to you, or they would be trying to trick you into opening a file that contained malware, and that would kick things off. Those techniques I just described, they do still happen. They can still sometimes work, but they're not really going to work against a system like we were talking about, that where you have those table stakes kind of, or the old table stakes kind of cybersecurity. Nowadays, phishing is being used to trick people into giving up their credentials. Okay, and that means that the person carrying out that trickery will have your password, will have your username. They can then try to use it, or they will sell that on the dark web, and someone else will try to use it. So that is far and away the biggest individual technique, right? If they get in, then there's a bunch of different things they may do. All right, they may just decide to use your access for business email compromise. They may try to go right into ransomware. We'll go into those a little bit, but from there, that might be enough. They can try in a cloud environment to just brute force their way in. And that isn't like I'm going to try and log in 1,000,000 times in a minute. That's going to be, I'm going to use common passwords and try and log in low and slow over weeks, months. So I don't, set off any kind of alarm bells about brute force attacks, right? And if you're doing that against enough accounts, you're eventually going to get some.
Yeah, which I think kind of comes back to, like, companies having appropriate policies around passwords. We still come across companies that are still using, 8-character passwords that are just at this point pretty much trivial to crack. But it really comes back to, like, what's the security kind of policies? How are they implementing and configuring their systems to at least reduce that type of risk?
100%. You need to really think about policies and procedures, right? And so this next one, inactive account abuse, is a case study for that. So threat actors love, or cyber criminals love, getting access to inactive accounts. An inactive account could be, say, an account for someone that is no longer with your organization, right? Or something that was set up for one-time use and was never torn down, right? A good practice, a best practice, is to not have inactive accounts. The reason a threat actor loves that is because they get in, no one's going to be checking it, right? It's not your account, Rob. It's, Rob, you might notice something going wacky with your own account if someone gets in there. But in the case of an inactive account, that just isn't the case. So that's another thing they'll try to do. The fourth bullet points to misconfiguration more than anything. You do see these stories sometimes about cloud applications being left wide open. So something is being put up on the cloud, and for whatever reason, there's no access control, or something really simple has been missed. A mistake was made by a person. And there are ways that cyber criminals will basically crawl the internet to try and find this kind of stuff, right? So that would be another way they could either get information or possibly get in. The final two are a little bit more complicated. So application consent attacks are basically where you get tricked into installing an application that is going to talk to your M365, and M365 is going to ask you, do you grant access to this application? And once you do, it never has to ask again. And it could be something that looks legit that isn't, or there's a number of ways they may trick you into installing that, but that's a way for them to get access, right? And once they have that, they don't need to ask for access permission again.
Yeah, so we see this a lot more frequency lately around like just like Chrome extensions. Hey, I want to
Yes,
add this functionality to my browser because I want to simplify some things and just kind of do it within the browser interface. So I'm just going to add this thing to do that process or whatever. A lot of those are now kind of malicious effectively and kind of doing the things that you say. You also mentioned kind of the inactive accounts. We work with a lot of kind of auto dealerships, and there's a huge amount of like kind of turnover in and out. And we see very frequently that they'll have accounts that have been deprecated or have been kind of like left alone. People have left a couple months ago. Their accounts are still set up in their CRM or related application, and they old people can go ahead, get access to that data, and there was wait for data to leak out of the environment. See that frequently too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the last one I'm going to mention here, we're actually going to do a bit of a dive into. It's adversary-in-the-middle, and it's lethal. It's absolutely lethal. So if we could move one slide forward, Chloe. Before I go into that, let's just say that these things I've been talking about, you know, in the past, you really, the hackers were in general very talented. I mean, sometimes you would see what we used to call script kiddies, but usually the people prosecuting successful major attacks were talented hackers. They knew what they were doing. Oh, what we're seeing now is not that. We do still see that, but a lot of the attacks using very sophisticated techniques are being carried out by everyone and anyone. The Power School breach that was it big in the news earlier this year. It's just to remind people, it was the biggest education breach in history. 70 million people impacted in the United States and Canada. That's students, teachers, that kind of thing. That was done by a 19-year-old teenager in New Jersey, a 19-year-old, okay, in his parents' house. And that individual was not a very strong hacker. He just made use of tools that he was basically renting off of the dark web. So everything is available as a service under the from the dark web. There are readily available hacking tools. I've mentioned one here called Mamba. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it costs $250 a month, and it brings a integrated suite of tools, everything a would-be cybercriminal needs to execute incredibly sophisticated attacks, and they don't need skill at all. So there's all these things available to people who, for whatever reason, are going to steer into a life of cybercrime. Then they also can use AI as an assistant as they're doing it, as if they don't need, it's unbelievable. And there's supposed to be ways for AI to not permit that, but there's simple ways around it. So the cost of entry is extremely low. People don't need a whole bunch of infrastructure themselves. They just need a laptop, and then they can go after anyone. So that's a little bit unfortunate as well. So can we go to the next slide, Chloe? So why does this matter? Well, cloud attacks really are number one in terms of frequency for what we see. It's most of the breaches are attributed to cloud attacks, and SMBs are really in the crosshairs because the stories we're hearing in the news are really big corporations and organizations. It gives you the impression SMBs aren't being impacted, but SMBs are. And in much greater numbers. It's not as newsworthy, right? And often SMBs don't have as much in the way of defense. So these cyber criminals know this and know to go after small organizations. So the bottom line is that SMBs need to reduce their cloud risk. And they need that to preserve their confidentiality and to ensure business continuity.
So let's pivot to the real world case study. Let's talk through, what does an adversary in the middle attack look like? We're seeing this in the wild now. We've been kind of dealing with several issues like this in the past. I know you guys are seeing it on your side. This is a kind of becoming more and more frequent.
Absolutely. So adversary in the middle is exactly how it sounds. The cyber criminal gets in between you and somewhere that is legit. And I'm going to outline here a adversary in the middle attack against Microsoft 365. And it is using a phishing kit. Now, the original technique, Field of Fact actually discovered this one about a year ago and published a blog about it. And basically, in this attack, the victim is going to receive an email from a compromised account. So they're going to get an email from an account they trust. And there's going to be a link to a login page that's going to look legitimate. It might be something like Outlook-support or SharePoint-support. And there's going to be some kind of rationale for you to go there, maybe to maintain access or there's a compelling reason, usually with some urgency, to make you go in there. And you're going to log in. You're going to get challenged for your multi-factor authentication. And the attacker in the middle is going to capture the login information and the MFA token, and they're basically going to be a conduit between you and a legitimate site. And once you've done that, they are going to capture what's known as a session cookie. And with that, they don't need your password anymore. And this is absolutely lethal because it bypasses multi-factor authentication. MFA is still super important, but it bypasses MFA. And this is now all packaged up in this Mamba toolkit. So for $250 a month, you can pick your targets. It's got a very nice little console you work from. It allows you to select what kind of attack you want to make. Do you want to pretend it's about SharePoint or Outlook or whatever? It does everything in the background for you. You don't need any skill whatsoever. So this defeats multi-factor authentication, which has up until now been a really super effective, and it's still super important, but it's terrifying for this reason.
All right. So just to kind of unpack that a bit. So an end user would get a email from a compromised account. They would be prompted to go ahead and log into the system with their two-factor authentication process. Once they've done that, there's some settings effectively that get kind of sucked out by the hacker. The hacker now can go ahead and has full access to that account, and they can go ahead and start logging in. They don't have to use or get prompted for two-factor anymore, and they are that person. Is that
Absolutely. And then they can, from there, the threat actor might decide to go after other people, might decide to just start stealing information, might encrypt data, might delete data. So there's really two big risks here, right? You lose data, and you may lose availability. Like you may not be able to use your systems because you're locked up or your data is gone. And both can be absolutely devastating, right? So, and this gives the cyber criminal leverage to ask for ransom.
so? How can we detect these kinds of attacks? How do we protect against them? Like, what are next steps? Like, how do we solve this?
Yeah. So again, it's, we talked about visibility, and visibility is the key. So if you're able to see, what's going on, you can actually defeat it. So there's really a mix of two things needed to deal with this kind of attack. First of all, you do need best practices. And I mentioned multi-factor authentication. It is still important because it's going to defeat those password-only kind of things. If they've stolen your password and they get, asked for your MFA and they don't have that, then it'll stop a lot of attacks, right? There's other best practices like least privilege, having really good backups. Those are really important things. But deep visibility for monitoring and blocking is what's going to defeat this last most lethal attack I was showing you. So you're going to see things like login from a system that's never been seen before, a log and from maybe a VPN that hasn't been used before. And that is enough, right? But a lot of cybersecurity solutions don't tackle that. Then beyond that, when a threat actor gets into your account, they're going to be doing things that aren't normal. So we look for those things, right? They're going to be changing inbox rules. They are going to be moving unusual amounts of data around. They're not going to be, if they go into your system, Rob, they're not going to be behaving like you. And
Hmm.
that's an area where like artificial intelligence is really helpful for the cyber defenders.
Yeah. So it's really at this point about having real-time notifications, real-time alerting of your cloud infrastructure.
Absolutely. And it's beyond alerting, it's blocking and locking, right? You want to be able, these cyber threat actors are moving very fast now. So you ideally want to be able to do these responses in near real time. And so, with the solution that we have partnered on, that is an option.
So as far as like, let's talk maybe like a little bit holistically around, we talked earlier about how most companies, vast majority of companies are just kind of looking at the computers and the endpoints. You're talking now about kind of cloud application monitoring and so forth. Like this is like, probably like how difficult, challenging is it to kind of implement this kind of a system? What's involved with it? Maybe you can talk a little bit like, higher level,
Yeah. So if you're trying to do it yourself, this is incredibly difficult. But if you find the right partner, the partner will do this for you, and it becomes turnkey. In our case, the solution that we offer is effectively turnkey. It'll defend the endpoints. It'll defend the cloud instances. If you elect to, it can defend the net, or it can add in network monitoring itself. But the first two, cloud and endpoint, are, for most SMBs, especially those that are only in the cloud or almost entirely in the cloud, the first two are absolutely sufficient. And that gives really strong protection to prevent data leakage, really strong protection to prevent system encryption and data deletion. And at the end of the day, it's all about providing peace of mind in 2025. And this is the kind of thing that will do that against these attacks that otherwise are like a hot knife through butter.
Yeah. So let's talk through just like from an end user, like a business leader's perspective. What is, in your opinion, minimum viable product from a security baseline perspective? What do I need to have as a baseline that's going to, let's talk about the 80/20 rule. What's going to protect me mostly, and it's going to maybe just take care of like the most egregious stuff, but it's also going to like maybe there's still some other gaps and ways that other companies or hackers can get in, but at least it's going to protect mostly the most important stuff. And like maybe you can talk through that. What does that look like for me? Like I guess based on my experience, I'm seeing endpoint at this point is just not enough, and really kind of layering on the cloud bit at a minimum is probably going to catch most stuff. Would you agree with that, or like what's
I,
how
I
do you see that?
do. I do. Again, for most SMBs who don't have super complicated environments, um, covering their cloud components, whether it's Google Workspace or M365 and those big cloud applications, covering those, integrating all of that telemetry, the security alerting out of those systems, along with, if you do have, say, a few physical servers, some laptops, obviously there'd be a lot of laptops probably, and desktop systems, regardless of OS. You bring in the telemetry from those two. It allows you to, first of all, reduce the threat surface, like find out, okay, what can we do to make these systems as secure as they can be, make it as hard for threat actors to get into as possible, right? And secondly, it allows you to monitor what's going on and then take action when when things are going wrong. And again, the indications sometimes of things going wrong are not easy, right? You need that overall context. You need that broad visibility to be able to figure out, oh, there's something wrong there, right?
Yeah.
And then you can take action and basically prevent organizations from being locked out.
Yeah. And then the kind of the next step up, really, like if you want the complete protection, you want peace of mind, then you really got to be monitoring the network as well, right? So it's kind of three components, right? We mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we talked about through, like, probably see on the screen here, our ITS Secure Essentials. That's effectively the endpoint plus the cloud bit. And then you see ITS Secure, and that's effectively, network, endpoint, and cloud holistically. I'll give you an example of something that we saw not too long ago. We had a prospect come to us, and they were in the middle of a cybersecurity incident, and one of their servers had gotten compromised and ransomwared. Uh, we did some diagnosis of, like, well, how did the hackers actually get into the system? It turned out that they actually got in through the video surveillance system. And so they were able to get into hackers. They, one of the managers there wanted to be able to view the camera system, the video from their home. So they had opened up that so they could, log in with their browser and so forth. The hackers got into that and then hopped across and got into the internal infrastructure and ransomware the environment. So I think that's where, those kinds of things you're vulnerable to if you're just looking at, endpoint and cloud. Through the network component, it really, I think, kind of ties it all together and provides that overarching visibility that I think you've mentioned earlier.
yeah, 100%. That example you provided is perfect for it. Like if an SMB does have to use, cameras or other IoT devices, operational tech, often you can't put agents on those things. And sometimes they have to be internet facing. You don't really want to have them internet facing, but in that case, for convenience, um, that was permitted. And the security on those devices typically isn't very good. So something like a network appliance gives you that visibility into what's going on with the device.
Yeah.
The same thing applies for like rogue IT or shadow IT, unprotected systems that people bring in.
So in addition to that, I think one of the other kind of, maybe you can go on to the next slide there, Chloe, is the importance of having a clear understanding of what is your current security posture, right? So we talked about, the idea of getting a kind of a risk assessment. This is a brushstroke understanding that helps a company understand what it is their current level of risk, what are their current level of vulnerabilities. At that point, you have clarity to understand, hey, this is where I'm exposed. These are my potential gaps. And these are the areas where I want to start to focus in on. And then you kind of prioritize these things. And so for folks that are attending the webinar today, there's a link here to go ahead and get a free risk assessment through us. We're happy to do this for you, for attendees. This is a pretty straightforward process to go through and get you a very clear report at the end that kind of delineates your current level of risk. So at least you have clarity and understanding of where you're at. So maybe kind of, Pat, if you want to add in and like, wait, what other kind of relevant points would you, make for, business leaders to help them evaluate their current posture?
Right. So I get this question all the time, like, where should we start? And you, it's hard to say where you should start if you don't know where you're at. And the
Yeah.
figuring out where you're at is where a third party like ITS can come and help you understand where you're strong, where you need improvement, right? And then you build a plan from there.
All right. So we got some questions that have come in. So let's kind of transition over to that. Um, let's see. How would a business owner even know if someone's already inside their Microsoft 365 or Google environment?
Okay. So if the threat actor if the cyber criminal is doing their job well, you're not going to know. All right. Um, I'll give you an example. They may start using your account to send out emails, and you're going to start getting emails back saying, "Hey, dude, what's going on here? This is a weird email you sent me." They will set up mail rules to filter out, those kinds of emails, right? Now, that inbox rule change, that's observable, that's detectable, that's something we look for, right? So, um, there you often won't know, but there might be some indications, like they might set up new accounts and you end up having to pay for them, and so your billing might be out of whack, or maybe they're using your accounts to do crypto mining, right? Like there are little indications that might come up, but ordinarily, you're not going to know. not
Can you
without
give
some
us?
kind of visibility anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, that's for sure. Another question came in. Can you give us examples on how to better secure video surveillance software that is, I think, web-based or app-enabled for remote video monitoring?
Well, okay, so at the software level, what we'd be looking for, we wouldn't be securing the software itself. I mean, you need to buy from reputable vendors. And there are some, I know there was a video vendor that came under scrutiny recently. It's been banned from government use, for example. So if it's banned from the government, you might not want to use it yourself, right? But so here's the thing. If a cyber threat actor is going to hack the video surveillance software, they're then going to try and get further into the system, because from the video surveillance software itself, they're not going to be able to execute monetized attacks. Like they want to burrow deeper in, and that's where we would see that. But the best practice for anything like that you are permitting external use for is like, you like step one, change the default password. Step two, how broadly are you allowing access to that? There are different kind of best practices around those kind of things.
Yeah, I think, from my kind of our experience there around, hey, you really want to start thinking about, there's VPNs that you can do to kind of gain access to that. That's really kind of an older technology at this point. Really, what we're moving towards now is a zero trust remote access type scenario. You can be leveraging that in order to access internal related systems. So, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to have a discussion around that. We've been doing a lot of that recently. All right, let's see. Do cloud systems encrypt their data? And if they get breached, aren't I secure because of that?
So it depends on the kind of breach, right? So now remember, a lot of these attacks I'm talking about, they're going to go in as you. So they're going to see the data as you see it. And to you, it's not encrypted, right? So they'll be able to access your files unless you separately encrypt them and then in your own day-to-day have to decrypt them. That's not going to be a concern for them. Now, when they go after, say, a cloud vendor or a big cloud bucket, a whole bunch of M365 data that they're coming in from the back end, that stuff should be encrypted at rest, right? Sometimes it isn't through, due to a misconfiguration, due to human error. There have been examples of that where like huge amounts of data have been accidentally left wide open or leveraged just because they should have been encrypted and weren't. So it's really a bit of column A and a bit of column B on that one.
Yeah. Is there any early warning signs that your cloud environment might be already compromised?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, if the cyber criminal is doing their job well, there won't be many indications, and they're going to be moving quickly too. So again, those indications that are there are going to be things we're going to be looking for. You might have new accounts popping up. There might be spikes in usage. Um, maybe they didn't do a good inbox rule, and you're going to start getting emails from colleagues saying, "Why are you sending me this stuff?" That kind of thing. So there can be indications, but often there won't be.
Yeah. I'm a business owner with a remote team, and we're all using cloud apps. What's the number one thing I should be worried about?
Okay, so I mean, asking questions of your provider is often a really good thing to do. And too often, though, the questions are around technology, right? Do you do this? Do you do that? Rob mentioned zero trust. Do you do zero trust? Well, what does that really mean for, the SMB order? What I'm going to suggest is you look at the attacks that are being commonly used today that are very strong and ask what the provider is going to do in the case of, say, an identity attack. Okay, someone tricks me out of my password. What are you going to do when a cyber criminal comes and logs in? Are you going to identify that? Will you block it? And secondly, if you go another level, one of the really common techniques that good cyber criminals are using today is they're using your own tools against you, something we call living off the land. Okay, so Mr. Security Provider, Mr. IT Provider, if a cyber criminal is going to come at me
Or
and be
Mr.
using my
IT
own,
team.
yeah, if a cyber criminal is going to be using my own my own tools against me, and that's very common, um, how are you going to detect it? How are you going to block it? What are you going to do? Right. So asking kind of practical cybersecurity questions of your team, of your provider, is a really good place to start. And again, ITS can help you in identifying even what those questions are.
Yeah. All right, another question. Is configuring Microsoft 365 conditional access policies and risky sign-on alerts the only defense to detecting in the moment those M365 man-in-the-middle attacks? What other tools are available?
So they aren't the only way, and so they're part of the solution. Conditional access policies can be very powerful. Threat actors can figure out, what the rules are and then try and circumvent those rules. But we really advocate defense in depth. So if one level fails, the next level kicks in, and we provide many, many levels of defense in depth. So, and again, it starts with visibility across a range of activities. So even if you don't have those things configured, a good MDR, managed detection and response solution, which is what ITS Essentials is, will detect the unusual logins, will detect, a login from, maybe it's not an unusual location. If they're smart, they're going to come in from a VPN from your city, but it'll be a piece of hardware they've never seen before, right? And if that doesn't tip you off, then the behaviors are going to be different, right? They're going to be doing hacker kind of things in there. And you can detect that kind of stuff. So those things you mentioned are good practices. They're not the only way, and they can still be circumvented.
This would be an interesting one. Can you share a story where cloud MDR or cloud monitoring helped detect a breach that other tools missed?
Well, I'll go back to the adversary-in-the-middle, the Axios example that I provided earlier. That attack will defeat almost all of the normal security tools that SMBs have in place. Okay, you need to have a good MDR solution in place to defeat that, and we see that happening in our install base several times a week. And so for the particular alert I'm referring to, which leads to lockdown, which leads to quarantining, it means that someone was actually tricked and someone actually gave up their password, right? And this is, I think, an indication of how you get to resilience, right? You want resilience. You want it, so, Rob, if you make a mistake, is it fair that ITS gets completely dragged down? No, not at all. But we see that time and time again in huge organizations. One little mistake leads to the whole organization, getting encrypted, right? So we actively prevent that. And resilience is the name of the game. You want to deliver that ability to take a punch in cyberspace.
For sure. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that come in. Give another 15 seconds here. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping things up. Patrick, I want to say thank you. Appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us today. There's I think a lot of actionable information that we can be taking back to our leadership. Feel free to reach out with any questions. We're happy to help out. Appreciate everybody's time today, and look forward to the next one. We're going to have a couple of upcoming webinars coming up, just to let you folks know that some invitations start going out in next week or so. We're going to have an AI use case, practical use cases for AI webinar. That's going to be September 18th. We're also going to have on September 25th, we'll be having what to do 24 hours into a breach. Like, what exactly are the steps that a company should be doing during the course of an active cyber incident? And it's going to be really super informational and helpful. So expect to see those in the near future, invitations, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks a lot, Pat. We'll catch up
Thank you,
next time.
Rob.
Appreciate
Cheers.
it. Thanks.